Whitecap is proudly supported by Sail Canada's BMO MasterCard. For every purchase made using the card, you win with no fees and cashback or air miles, and Canada's high-performance sailing programs get supported. This credit card is the card for Canadian sailors. Scan here to get yours today. Hey, welcome to Whitecap Regatta Reports from the Princess Sofia Regatta in Palma, Spain. Today we're talking to NACRA 17 team Galen Richardson and Madeline Gillis, who qualified for selection to the Pan Am Games at Santiago, Chile at this event. Madeline, Galen, welcome and congrats.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us
on. So tell me about the regatta first, about the organization, the atmosphere, the venue. I know it's a very famous event, so how did it feel being in Palma?
It was really cool. Palma's definitely an event that I've heard about for a long time. You know, ever since coming up through the Olympic classes and everything, you always hear about Palma. It's like one of the biggest events. And it was really cool to finally be on the ground there. It was both of our first European Olympic class events. And it was really cool for it to be an event with all of the Olympic classes, which was really cool. So it was really big. All the Olympic classes are spread out through, I think, 3 venues kind of across Palma, like across the bay. So it was really cool to be there, see all the athletes, and just like be a part of the atmosphere. It was a pretty neat experience.
What did you think, Madeline?
Oh yeah, it was incredible. It was a lot lead up to the event, so it was a lot of anticipation. And it was just a great venue. We had a little bit of everything too. So it made for some great training, and as well, the regatta was great.
Cool. What kind of training did you guys do in advance? Like how long and who were you with and stuff?
We arrived, so Galen arrived a little earlier than I did. We were both still in school, finishing our graduating year. So I had a couple more things to finish up with school. So he arrived, set up the boat, which I'm grateful for. And then we did some training with the Belgian team, which was awesome. They're also a junior team, so it was great to do lineups with them. Also great to get to know them because the Junior Worlds will be in Belgium this year. So
cool.
We were training with them and with their coach in lead up to the regatta, as well as we joined some Dutch sailors as well, which was great.
Great. And so, and how did the event go for you, like performance-wise, in terms of your finish position, and then also like process-wise, in terms of improving yourselves as a team? It
was up and down for sure. Going into it, we obviously know this was our first European Olympic class event, so we weren't expecting very much. But then on the first day, I think we had 2 races, and it was pretty brutal. We got time limited on both races. It was like pretty crazy conditions, and that like the wind was dropping off pretty hard throughout the day, and we had like storm cells going all throughout the bay. And on the second race, it was like half the fleet got time limited.
Wow.
So yeah, it was a pretty brutal day, but we kind of like, I remember towing in, and neither of us were super like bummed about it. Like we were joking about it. We're like, oh, yeah, it is what it is. And then throughout the event, we were working with a coach from Norway, Celia, who is our coach at the event. And yeah, each day we went on the water, we were kind of like identifying stuff that we really wanted to work on for the next day. And we would have kind of big takeaways from each day on the water. And each day it was like a new takeaway that we'd try to apply to the next day. And it was really funny because we'd have these meetings after sailing, and like all that we wanted to do was to go back on the water and like put these into our sailing. So it was a period of like 16 hours between our sailing sessions that would just suck because all we were thinking about was just like going back on the water for racing the next day to like put these practices into play.
Oh, that's interesting.
And so we got to the last day, and we'd kind of been like progressing throughout the event in terms of results and our sailing and stuff. And then we got to the last day, and we really put emphasis on doing like using the time we had before the races. We had a lot of time before the races when we were waiting for the gold fleet to finish. And so using that time to kind of put some of these changes that we wanted to make into our sailing, and especially having training partners like the Belgian team, it was helpful to do that. And then, yeah, we were actually really surprised on the last day. Well, I shouldn't say surprised, but on the last day we were able to put a lot of these practices into our sailing, and it was like hugely beneficial. And it was really cool because the first race we finished like mid-fleet, and it was our best finish of the whole event. And we went up to our coach afterwards and we were like, oh man, like we wish we did this differently and whatnot. And she was like, are you guys kidding me? Like you guys just finished mid-fleet. That's your best performance of the event. You guys just had like a killer downwind, which is like what we were working on. And she was like, and you're still disappointed that like boats are in front of you. And so the next like 3 races, we had 4 races that day. And the rest of the day, we consistently had like mid-fleet finishes. We were top 10 to each windward mark, to each first windward mark, which is really awesome. And so yeah, it was really cool to end the event kind of on like a really high note like that. For us to know that like we have international potential and we can compete with an international fleet like that. And to move up a couple of spots on the leaderboard at the end of the day was
That's great.
a nice
That's
cherry
great.
on top.
So, Madeline, if you were like going to kind of put that in perspective in terms of how you improved versus how you finished, what's your take on that?
Yeah, we it's just such a great, huge opportunity to have a fleet to kind of see differences with. So when we're doing our training at home, a lot of the changes that we made throughout the week, we wouldn't necessarily have picked up on as big changes. But throughout that regatta, we were really able to see how big those changes were. And it would be as simple as 1 or 2 takeaways each day that our coach picked up or we picked up as things that the fleet were doing with their upwind foiling or their downwind foiling that we should try to adjust and do differently. And those changes, just by being with a fleet, we were able to see that progression. So it was really, really neat.
That's great. Yeah, it must be really hard from being in Canada
Yeah.
to try to, I remember speaking to Nicola Gurka, who did the, 2016 Anacris. She said they bought their boat and it probably in 4 years it spent a week in Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really, like, being in Palma really highlighted how important it is to kind of train and sail with a fleet like that. Like, just like Madeline said, you're going to pick up stuff like that, sailing with 30 boats on a race course that we're just never going to pick up sailing by ourselves in Halifax Harbor.
Yeah.
So it's like, it was really awesome to be there. We're really happy we were able to go to the event and make it work, just because we had the opportunity to sail with like 30 other boats. And as we mentioned, some of those boats were junior teams, so it was nice to be kind of within the same ballpark as some of those teams.
So when is that event? When is the Junior Worlds?
It is end of July.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's a big one on the calendar then?
Yeah. We're looking forward to preparing for that event. We plan on spending a little time prior to the event around the venue and in the area to train with that Belgium team or just with ourselves as well. And this summer we are prioritizing kind of getting those training partners in. So we have a really exciting opportunity. We're going to be sailing with a German team. The crew of the team was here for the 2022 Worlds. So she made some connections. She really liked Nova Scotia. And so we were chatting with them about kind of coming here to train, and they're super keen. So we've set up a really awesome training block here, and then possibly in lead up to the Junior Worlds, we'll be training with them kind of where in their home.
Just them. Just that team is coming to the Bay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really great. I was going to say, Galen, that's a very professional attitude in terms of like feeling like you might have, you might have finished mid-fleet. It might have been your best finish, but yet you didn't do the things that, didn't have your goals. I've heard that a few times from people saying like, I might have had a crappy regatta, but then my coach goes through me and says like, hey, you did this, you did that. And it's like, come out feeling like really pumped because you've improved.
Oh, for sure. And I think that was kind of like coming away from the event, like we know we made all these improvements, which was like super cool. And yeah, after each race, we were like, oh my God, that was awesome. Like we just finished mid-fleet. That's what we were trying to do the whole regatta. But then that didn't take away from us being like, okay, this is what went well. This is what we need to do for the next race. And I think like coming away from the event, the attitude we very much have, and I think it's Paul Tignley who says this, is happy but never satisfied. And that's very much like race after race, day after day after that event, very much happy but not satisfied. So very happy with the improvements we made, and everything that we were able to do during the event, but never satisfied. We know there's so much more in the tank, and there's 100% still that fire in the belly to keep it going.
Excellent. Oh, I love that. I'll have to remember that.
Yeah, it's a good one.
It's a good one, yeah.
You mentioned upwind foiling. I know that's sort of a new thing for the class. Like,
Yeah.
how are you doing on that, and how much of the fleet is really getting it down, and what's that like?
Oh, yeah, it's incredible. And you wouldn't believe it, too, that it's only really been around in the fleet since the rudder differential kind of came out, which was only a year ago. And we were doing that regatta, and the top boats in that top 5, top 10 just really have, it's like a science. They have it really nailed down. And it's a really neat thing to learn because there are so many different settings that you can adjust.
Okay.
And one of the things we kind of took away when sailing with the Belgian team and lining up and upwind foiling is we often would be quick just from sailing other boats to be like, what are we doing wrong with our sheeting, our steering, everything else? What are we doing wrong? And he said, if you are around other boats that are up and foiling, you need to go straight to the numbers and straight to those foil numbers. We have numbers along our deck, a range from 1 to 0, and then the negatives to about -3. And each of those numbers represents just 1 degree of range on the boards, and it's like a world of a difference. So getting hours on the water with other teams kind of helps you build a matrix of which numbers you want to be running when going upwind. So it's really cool, quite analytical, and we really enjoy that aspect, that side of sailing.
So those what do you do? Rudder differentials. So basically, the rudder is adjustable, right? Where it wasn't before. Is that the difference?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and then Galen, you have control of that when you're driving.
Yeah, it's really cool. So this is the new system that was put in literally pretty much a year ago now. And so you could always change the rake, the angle rake on your main foils, which essentially controls how much lift the foil is generating. And before you could change the rake on your rudders, but you had to like undo 4 bolts, like change it super precisely, then like tighten them back up. So you could do it like between races and day to day, but you couldn't do it actively like while you were straight line sailing. And so now they've put in systems where you can, just with a rope system, you can actively pull to change the angle of the rudder. And so what it does is with the new system, we have a 4 degree range with our rudders. And so you can set your rudders from like 0 to 4 degrees. Don't tell the Italians this, but we actually have them set from -1 to 3.
Oh man, I've heard a lot about that.
This just in. Yeah, so we have the degrees on our rudders set from -1 to 3 degrees. So essentially what that means is when our rudders is set at -1, we can actually generate negative lift, and we can create righting moment. So with upwind foiling, and this is very similar to how they're tuning their foils in like the F50 is, like the SailGP boats is, with their windward foils or with their windward rudders, they'll have negative lift. So instead of lifting the boat out of the water, it's actually like sucking it into the water. So we now have this with our boat. So we'll set our upwind foiling, we'll set our windward rudder to -1, and we'll set our leeward rudder to 3 degrees. So it means that we're generating a little bit more righting moment on the windward hull, as well as a little bit more lifting on the leeward hull. So essentially how I describe it to people is it's like having a third person helping us trapeze off the side of the boat.
Interesting. Yeah, way to look at. Don't want to get too much into the weeds there, but when you say a rope, because so where it's an actual rope. It's not like a twist like they have on the wheels of
Yeah.
Right? I wish.
That'd be awesome.
And you're controlling it, Galen, and where does it come out of and stuff?
Yeah, so it's literally like the same as you would have kind of like your Cunningham or your boom bang on a traditional boat. It's literally like on our deck. I have 1 rope for each rudder. So if I pull the rope on, it'll take lift out of the rudder. And if I let the rope off, it'll put lift into the rudder. So we have 1 rope for each rudder. So
Okay.
when we come out of attack, for example, I'll uncleat one and put all the lift into the leeward rudder, and then totally pull on another one, and take all the lift out of the windward rudder. And so we have those on. It's a completely continuous control system. So we
Okay.
have those on both sides of the boat. So both on starboard and port, I have controls of both rudders.
And so what percentage are people doing like foiling upwind, like the top crews and median and that kind of stuff? Like
I'd say
50%, 90%?
I'd say it depends on the wind for sure. Because
Yeah.
we can't we need about in racing we probably need about 8 to 10 knots to properly take off without scrubbing too much angle. But honestly, I think the top teams they're 90-95% foiling. The only time they drop off is when they're going
For
for
the
attack.
maneuvers. Yeah.
Okay.
And you see off the line, often boats would go for pointing, just for height off the line. So kind of one hull in the water. But then other than that, it's about it's kind of an added element of strategy because you need that lane below you once you get off the line. So you're getting high enough. And then once you have that window below you, boom, popping and going. Because
Right.
you do need to spill a little amount of height to pop, but then once you
Right.
get up, then you can get it back.
That's right. Somebody told me that recently that a start isn't really a speed contest; it's a pointing contest
Yeah.
in some
Yeah,
ways,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Cool. So that must be the jumps in performance must be crazy with that if it only started a year ago, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny.
Oh,
I'd say
definitely, yeah.
I'd say we're pretty lucky to have gotten into the boat when we did. Because I think if we had gotten into the boat 4 or 5 months later, we would have been 4 or 5 months. We got into the boat right when everyone was getting the system. So it was new to us, and the whole boat was new to us. But it was new to everybody else as well. So
Yeah.
we were
Right.
kind of on. Yeah, I wouldn't say the
Yeah.
same learning curve as everyone else, but we were all starting from zero at the same time, which was nice.
Yeah,
Right,
it's definitely
right.
neat.
That's cool. That's great. So and then it must be getting down to Santiago with your boat must be a big must be difficult.
Yes. So we actually have to send our boat off in June for the Pan Am Games, which will be end of October, early November for us. So it's a long time without our boat, which is a little
Yeah.
sad. But we're really lucky to be training where we are, and there's opportunities to be able to use the boat that the Iron SYS has, as well
Okay.
as some training opportunities elsewhere. So we're just kind of being strategic with our planning there. But we'll be ramping up hard for Santiago, just not in our boat.
Right, right. What's
It's-
Go ahead, Galen. Go ahead.
I was gonna say it's definitely a lot of strategy, and we're really fortunate that the squadron, which is Maddie's home club in Halifax, they own a NACRA 17 for their programs, and we're fortunate to be able to train in that boat. So we can send our boat end of June to Santiago and then not have it for 5 months. And it's kind of funny to think we have a big training block coming up kind of May and then the first half of June. And it's kind of funny to think that we'll be preparing all of our systems and all of our boats for the Pan Am Games in a month.
Oh God.
So once we
I
put in that
see.
container, it has to be ready to go for the Pan Am Games essentially.
Wow. Wow. So the Pan Am's is a spot to qualify Canada for the Olympics. Is that right?
It is, yeah.
And what would that what's the position so you get one boat per, is it one boat from North America qualifies a country? Is that how it goes?
Yeah. Yeah.
And who's the main how do you see that? Who is the States, I imagine, are strong or
Yeah, so the American scene, they really only have one full-time NACRA 17 campaigning right now. And they've been going for, I think this is at least their second quad together. But yeah, so you're right. So at the Pan Am Games, there's one North American country spot to qualify for the Olympics. And we're obviously not as ranked as high or as competitive with the American team right now. So we we would rely, if we wanted to take advantage of that Pan Am spot for Olympic qualification, we would have to rely on the Americans qualifying at another event.
Oh, okay.
So at the end of August, there's the World Championships in the Netherlands, and I think there's 8 or 9 country qualification spots there. So essentially what that would mean is if the Americans are able to qualify in The Hague in the Netherlands, that may leave the North American country qualification spot open for the Pan Am Games.
I see.
So yeah, we're not focusing on it too much because it is an element of luck. We're rooting for the Americans for sure. But it's definitely it's definitely in the back of our minds for sure.
Cool. So that would be the next thing, would be to qualify the country and then to qualify you guys for 2024. That's the ultimate goal.
Not exactly for us at the moment. We're looking more just because we started in 2022, halfway through a quad. We never really had our sights directed at 2024 at Paris. We're looking more long term at 2028, just with our campaign and the longevity there, and building our team up for 2028. 2024 is we go to the regattas that would potentially qualify us to go to 2024, but it's not necessarily something that we're focusing all of our energy into.
Right. Now that makes sense. 2028 would be really great as well. I thank you guys for being on the podcast. And I did want to ask you one sort of less necessarily NACRA 17
of
course,
question, and that I wonder what your thoughts are in terms of mixed crews in general. The NACRA
awesome.
17.
So much fun.
Okay,
yeah.
Go ahead.
I think Maddie has a big opinion on this. I'll let her go first.
Oh no! Yeah. Don't say that.
No, I have strong opinions on both sides of the question, so I'd love to hear what you have to think.
I think it's really fun. I also spent a lot of time in the FX, just doing mix in the FX, and I had a lot of fun. It's really a neat dynamic, and we do spend a lot of our time, like, we have strength and conditioning training, but we also have our mental performance training, and I don't know, girls and guys are different, but it's a great dynamic for on the water in the boat park, and it's been working well. It's going great.
That's awesome. No, I think that if you took my opinion, if you took the entire world that are racing sailboats at a higher level, you probably find more men doing it. So I think as a sport and as a culture, it's good to try to get more women into it at the higher level at the same time. So that's great if we get 100 more high performance women sailing. That's awesome. But I think that the other thing is it's really hard to find a crew to begin with, that if then you also you also have to find a female partner as well, that kind of cuts down on your ability to to find somebody, and then there's no you don't get mixed crews racing against just men crews or just women crews, so that kind of cuts down on maybe the number of boats out there entirely.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happened to me when I was first wanting to transition from the 420 into the FX. We were kind of thinking, you know what, let's just try this out, and both of us learned the boat. His long-term goal would have been to go into the 49er, myself in the FX, so we were both starting out just in the FX, and it's just a great opportunity to learn. That was with Jack Ogan, and then again when my sailing in the FX was kind of finishing up.
Right.
So when I was talking to Galen about that, we kind of saw this as an opportunity. You know what? Let's try out sailing together. Why not?
Yeah, I think one of the other things that's so great about it is because I think a lot of the attention around males versus females in this, and not necessarily sailing but just sporting in general, is when you look at sports that maybe require more strength and stuff like that, it's easy to look at males and be like, oh, they might excel in that sport a bit more. But the great thing about sailing is strength is it's a big aspect to our sport, but it's like one of so many aspects. And there's so many other things that require to make a good sailor. You don't just need to be like have the strength to be a good sailor, you know? Like the knowledge and the tactics and the strategy that you need to be a good sailor is tremendous. I don't think we should overlook that. And like anybody can have that, you know, female or a male. And I think
Yep.
that's one of the great things about like our sport is, you know, you don't just need to be like a big muscular guy in order to excel at this sport. And I think that's really cool. And especially, you know, in the NACRA, it is a very like physically demanding boat, but it is also a very technically demanding boat. And I think that's why the boat works so well for, you know, a mixed gendered crew. Is because it requires a lot of technical knowledge, which it doesn't matter if you're male or female, you can have that. And I think when it comes to like opportunities in sport right now, and that's kind of like one of the great things about foiling is that you require this large base of like technical knowledge, and anybody can have that, which I think is really cool, and it adds like a really awesome aspect to our sport, which I think not many other sports have.
Absolutely, absolutely. Galen Richardson, Madeline Gillis, thank you so much for being on Whitecap Regatta Reports. Best of luck in Santiago and going forward.
Thank you for
Great.
having
Thank
us.
you so much.